We will now take a quick look at sandboxed operations and what is allowed and what's not allowed in a sandbox solution. Now the idea, of course, is that a user can upload a sandbox solution without the intervention of a site collection administrator. So that's really one of the main aims of the sandboxing platform. Now what we want to do is to provide the stability benefits of the sandboxed operations for those end users. But of course, some specific operations will not be supported in those web parts or solutions. Furthermore, certain requirements must be met. So as a developer, if you're creating a web part that you want a user to upload into the sandbox, you need to be aware of what you can and cannot include in your sandbox solution. So just to recap, there are quite a few disallowed operations for sandbox web parts, such as you cannot work with the SP web part manager to affect other web parts on the page. You can't have connections between sandbox web parts, and you can't programmatically work with the web part zones or the tool panes or the tool parts. Furthermore, your web parts must derive from system.web.ui.webparts.webpart and not one of the older SharePoint style web parts. Your scripts must be registered with the script manager, and your components must allow partially trusted callers. There are also some bits of functionality that are disallowed. So as I say, you can't have connections, but more importantly, there are some namespaces and operations that you cannot access, and you can't do things like asynchronous postbacks. Now Visual Studio is very aware of what's allowed and what's not allowed in a sandbox web part. So as we saw in the previous demo, even though we can start to use SP-Farm objects, Visual Studio doesn't even provide us IntelliSense for that because it knows it's disallowed. Also, we may add the layouts folder and an application page to a web part project for a sandbox solution, but notice that that doesn't even build. Visual Studio will not build that because it knows that you cannot deploy layouts folders or subfolders as part of the sandbox solution, and that you cannot include application pages. So we will see some of the specific operations that are disallowed in the next demo, so you can see in action how the sandboxed environment deals with code that breaks some of these rules.